I'm going to talk to you today about a topic that has caused a lot of confusion with a lot of students, and that is the topic of intervals. In a second, we're going to head over to the desktop and I'm going to graphically illustrate to you how intervals work. But I want you to keep in mind something before we get started on it. What we're doing is we're talking about measurements. We're talking about distance. It's kind of hard for us to conceptualize the idea of distance and sound, or the distance between two sounds, or more specifically, the distance between two pitches. But that's what we're doing. We're measuring. Simple as that. We're taking two notes and we're measuring the distance between them. Now, these distances have specific names. Minor seconds, major seconds, perfect fifths, perfect fourths, things like that. But they're just names, okay? We also, on a ruler have inches and centimeters and yards and feet. And they're all worth different amounts of distance. But we don't generally get confused with those names because they become so normal to us. We've used them so often. So with intervals, we want to get that same comfort. We just want to understand that this name represents this distance. And it's a distance that we hear rather than see. Okay? So we're going to get started on this. And this is going to be one of the longer tutorials that you're going to have to deal with. But it's also going to be the most important tutorial you deal with. Getting intervals under your belt will unlock all, and I mean all, the secrets of music theory to you. All right? So, get ready, because it's going to be a long ride, but I'm with you the whole way. Please, feel free to communicate with me at any point throughout this semester or throughout this topic, and ask any questions. I don't want you to be confused, and I will explain it 20 different ways if I have to. So, get ready. We're about to dive into intervals. Here we go.
Okay, so this is our first video tutorial on intervals, and this is part one of a series of video tutorials that you'll see throughout this class. I divided them up so that you would have ample time to go back and look at specific areas that you needed to work on if you had questions in, and that way you don't have to search through hours of videos to find what you want. So each of these videos will be very short, very concise, and hopefully that'll make it easier for you to find what you need. So we're starting on this video with the smallest intervals that we have in our Western music system: whole steps and half steps. And we also call those major seconds and minor seconds. We're also going to be learning about flats and sharps and how they affect notes in this discussion. So this is going to be a very important video for you. So let's begin by plotting some notes on our staff right here. You can see that at the top of the screen. I'm going to put an F in, and then I'm going to put a G in. And by the way, I'm using Finale 2014 to do all this stuff. So, in case you're wondering, that's what it is. Alright, so I have two notes. I have F and G. And you'll notice that F is on the space and G is on the line. Now, there is a distance between these two notes. And I want you to understand that the distance I'm talking about is not on the printed page. Yeah, it's about 1.5 inches or so apart from each other, but we're talking about distance in sound, sonic distance, aural distance, the distance between two pitches. That's what an interval is. So we're listening to the distance. We're not seeing it. Very important distinction to make. Let's go down to our keyboard schematic, and we'll see F, and next to it we have G. So the two white notes, F and G, are right next to each other. Now that is what is known as a whole step. We can call it a whole step because we can actually fit a note in between those two notes. You'll see the black key here. If we can fit a note in between two notes, those two notes are a whole step, also known as a major second. So F to G is a major second. Now, going back to this note in the middle. This note, this black key, has two names. And you'll discover in music that most things have more than one name. What we want to do is we want to shrink the interval. We want to make the distance between F and G smaller. So let's go back up to our staff here. I'm going to get rid of these notes. And instead of F, I'm going to put F sharp. And then I'm going to put G again. So we have F sharp to G. F sharp to G. These two notes are adjacent. You cannot fit another note in between these two notes. Okay? So that is a half step. You've made one half step from F sharp to G. That is also known as a minor second. A minor second is the smallest interval you can have in our Western system. So, half step and a whole step. We can also say that from F to G is two half steps. We go from F to F sharp to G. It's going to be important for you to be able to count half steps so that you can figure out certain intervals. Alright? So, two half steps equals a whole step, just like everything else in the world. Two halves equals a whole. Okay, so that was F sharp to G, but we can do this a little bit differently. I'm going to get rid of our notes again. And this time, instead of F sharp, I'm going to put F back in, and then I'm going to use G flat. Okay? So you'll see this note is now called G flat. This is G, and I went from G down to G flat. And now I shrunk the interval in the opposite direction. So G flat to F is a half step. It's a minor second. F going the other way, F to G flat is a half step. It's a minor second. So yes, this note is F sharp and G flat. And you're probably wondering why that is, or how am I ever going to use that? Well, it depends on the key signature you're in, which we're going to discuss later on. And it depends how you want to affect your notes. Okay? So just accept for now that flats lower a pitch by a half step and sharps raise a pitch by a half step. Okay? Flats go down, sharps go up. All by a half step. Alright. Now, back to our staff. I'm going to put in two other notes now and show you another aspect of the keyboard. I'm going to plot in an E and an F. Okay? Now, this may look the same as the F to the G, line to space. Okay? But if we look down at our keyboard, here's E and here's F. You'll notice there is no note in between E and F. So these two notes are adjacent. You cannot fit another note between them. That means that that is a half step. So E to F is a half step. Okay? Now, again, when you look at the staff, you're going to think, well, E to F, it looks like a whole step because that's kind of what F to G look like. Well, that's not the case. And you really need to understand or have a keyboard in front of you and understand how it's laid out. E to F is a half step, just as B to C is a half step. Okay? So if you see a note, a black note in between two notes, then you'll have a whole step. C to D is a whole step. Alright? C to C sharp is a half step. D to D flat is a half step. Or I could have said C to D flat. So there's a lot of different combinations that you can make with this. But if you understand the basic idea that flats lower by half and sharps raise by half, you'll be okay. And just remember, between E and F and B and C, there is no what we call an accidental. That's sharps or flats. It's the catch-all term for sharps and flats. Okay? So, that's the tutorial on whole steps, half steps, major seconds, and minor seconds. So, make sure that you study this thoroughly, and I'll see you on the next tutorial.